What is going on this morning? I think I'm going to call this coffee with, I don't know, something. Maybe have some kind of coffee thing in the theme. Have a cup of coffee and talk about guitar stuff. Today, we're going to talk about pricing. I think that I've been thinking about this. You know, we did this case video the other day, and one of the big things that people talk about is should a guitar come with a case? I can't believe guitars don't come with cases anymore. And my contention is that I'm glad they don't come with cases. And so this whole thing around how much guitars should cost and everything, I think it's a big misconception. And so, because it's one of these deals, every guitar over $1,000 is kind of a scam. I don't mean kind of a scam, but you know what I mean? Like people just think it's not worth it. But honestly, I think they're priced really fairly. Even though, this guitar doesn't have stainless frets, this guitar doesn't have a case, this guitar is made overseas, etc., etc. Thing is, we need to count our blessings here. We are in the best time ever to buy an inexpensive guitar, right? There's inexpensive guitars, there's mid-price guitars, and there are more expensive instruments, right? And there are cheap guitars, there are guitars that are good value, and there are premium instruments, right? And there's everything in between, which is really cool. We never had that before. We've never had that before. So let's get this out of the way. I don't want to defend bad products. I don't want to defend like just junk, right? I never do. You know me. I never do. But we're really talking about perspective here. We're talking about expectations. I think expectations have gotten really screwed up over time about what a guitar is and what it should have and what it shouldn't have, and etc. So inexpensive instruments, they used to be terrible. Plywood, uh, you know, really bad finishes, terrible pickups. Basically, you could get them usable, and I know there's going to be a guy in the oh yeah, I have a plywood Squire from whatever. Okay, cool, but they weren't good. They're not what a cheap guitar, an inexpensive guitar is. I want to say inexpensive. They're not what an inexpensive guitar is now, right? Today we have CNC guitars. We have better factories, import factories. The import factories have gotten much better because even their quality control has come up. We have, all kinds of value added things like roasted maple. Sometimes those are sort of iffy. Stainless frets, sort of iffy. But you can get locking tuners, all that kind of stuff on inexpensive instruments now, which is pretty cool. So it's not that those guitars have gotten more expensive, even though they have. We could talk about economics and a whole different thing. I'm talking about the instruments themselves. They're coming with more stuff, and they're better, right, than they were in the 80s. And actually, if you look at inflation, they're not actually that much more expensive, to be honest with you. But one of the biggest problems is that I think here's a big problem that I think is the thing. There's no such thing as an entry level instrument anymore. There's no such thing as an entry level instrument anymore from the expectation of the guitar player. Okay. And what I mean by that is everybody expects in guitar enthusiast features on inexpensive instruments. Okay. So an entry level instrument is an entry level instrument. An entry level job is an entry level job, right? Like an entry level anything is an entry level anything. If you are a bicycle enthusiast, you don't buy a Huffy from Walmart, right? Now, if that's all you can afford to have a Huffy from Walmart, then you have a bicycle that functions as a bicycle and you go and you ride it with your friends. But if you are an enthusiast, you don't buy a Huffy from Walmart. You don't say this Huffy from Walmart should have hydraulic brakes and handlebars that weigh this many grams and carbon fiber and $1,000 wheels, the Chinese version of it. unhuffy from Walmart. You don't say that. That is an entry-level bicycle. Guitars used to be, and in my opinion should be, the same way. They are aspirational types of things. So the very entry-level price instruments are just basic instruments. They're just a guitar that functions as a guitar. But because the expectation of guitar players that all these features should be available on everything has sort of ruined it. And the problem is that they've actually cheapened the features themselves. So stainless frets, there's a difference between stainless frets and stainless frets. Okay, as much as you don't want to admit that, it's true. We've talked about this before. It's really a thing. So just because you throw some stuff onto a cheap guitar doesn't make it as good as a more expensive guitar. It just spec inflates it and then ruins the perception of the entry level guitar. That's really all it does. And all those things what happens is all those things end up having to be done at a cost that make them exist, but that's it. Do they add value? Perceived value, but are they really good? No. That's the problem. And here's the other thing. And then the next problem is this. It ruins the perception of guitar players to say that if it doesn't have all these things, stainless frets, locking tuners, and blah, 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 and it costs more than this, then it's overpriced, right? That's a problem, okay? That's a problem. So what you're doing is you're comparing enthusiast direct brands with basically giant dealer network consumer products, okay? So basically what you're doing, just like this bicycle thing, we could talk about anything like that, okay? Of course, you know I'm a pocket knife person, right? And so you could say, well, actually, let's use something more practical for more people. So let's say you have a snap-on wrench and you have the wrench that you buy at Harbor Freight. The snap-on wrench is for the enthusiast or for the worker or for the, right? And there's a reason. And there's a reason why that stuff costs more. There is more value there. Now, if a person who is not that enthusiast doesn't see that value, then that spending that extra money is a bad purchase for them. They should not buy that snap-on thing. They should buy that entry-level thing, at Harbor Freight or whatever. Because there's no reason. If they don't appreciate the differences, then there's no reason for them to buy the more expensive thing. However, they also should not expect that the less expensive thing at Harbor Freight, socket wrench or whatever it is, should have the same exact features and value as the more expensive thing. That's the difference between the two products. Though that difference exists for a reason. So that's the thing. Why is it expensive? Like, people want to say it's all corporate greed and all this kind of stuff, but when you really stack things up, it's the thing. I'll give you another example. Cases. People say that cases should be included with every guitar, and I disagree. Here's why. A case costs $100. Plus, the case that you get with your guitar isn't that great. We could not. Everybody's like, throw your Les Paul off of a roof. We couldn't. The case isn't good enough. It's just chipboard and vinyl. I've got a Fender. I've got a Tweed Fender case sitting right here. That thing would never hold up. That doesn't even hold a Fender Telecaster as good as the case that I used the other day. So what do you want? Do you want to spend more money for something that you don't really want? Or do you want to save the money? Because it's going to add cost no matter which way you look at it. Do you want to save the money and get something that really works for your application? That's a great question. You can't have both. You can't have, it should include a case. Why is it expensive? You can't have both. The problem is with cases, especially, is it's not even the cost of the case. It's the cost of storing it. It's the cost of shipping it. Think about, we talked about this yesterday. Think about how much more space on a container an import guitar would take. That would raise the shipping costs through the roof with weight and cubic feet of guitar, right? If it was in a hard shell case, for example. Most factory cases anyway are just sort of emotional support cases. They're not really like a really good case anyhow. So why don't you just go get your own? That works. The other problem that has kind of caused all this perception issue is the internet and the various sales models. Okay, so we used to have basically the normal retail sales model where you would go into a guitar store. They would have 40% of the profit. It would be a retail distributor. It's called a distribution model. So you'd have the retail model, you'd have the retailer, you'd have the distributor, and then you would have the factory, right? And so about 50% of the cost of the guitar is what it comes from the factory, and then 50% is in the distribution model. So you would have about 10 or 15% ish going to the distributor, and then you would have 30 to 40% depending going to the retailer, right? And that would pay the people that live in your neighborhood to sell you the guitar. And so that's how the distribution model worked. Well, when the internet comes along, it changes everything because you can cut out the distribution model. Well, you can cut out the retail model. And so here's what a lot of times will happen is you'll have these gray market distributors, basically, which is what they'll do, is they will either they'll figure out ways to get product. They could be not authorized dealers, sort of like on Amazon. The other thing you can do is you can cut out retail profit margin, that 40% on the top, and sell at a lower price and make from the, make it like a 20% or a 30% over factory cost. There's all kinds of ways to cut cost and then kill the manufacturer suggested retail price value of an instrument. And that's not always bad. Sometimes there's clearance and sometimes there's stuff like that, but there's a lot of gray market stuff. There's a lot of kind of internet sales practices that people almost expect now. They don't just allow it, but they almost expect it. And so when you see, stuff online for a particular price, like a Harley Benton, for example, they've vertically integrated their sales and distribution and so that now that they can sell this thing at a super cheap price. Plus it's I'm going to call that one, it's a cheap guitar. Plus it's made in China, like everything about it's cheap. And then they vertically integrated their distribution model to keep everything sort of tighter, right? So that is an excellent example of what has happened in warping how a guitar should be sold, right? And that then changes the expectations of the consumer. Now you could say, well, that's bringing more value to the consumer, but what it's not really, because what it's doing is it's actually warping the perception of what actually is possible in a sustainable business model. And you could say, well, they're sustaining. Well, no, they're not. They actually had to pull out of the United States because of not being able to do it. It's just in warranty. There's a lot of value that you give up when you go to a model like that. You give up customer support. You give up consistency of product. There's a lot of value that you give up when you go to a model like that. And so that's why I don't support that company, is because I don't like the entire model. I don't really care about the guitars. The guitars are probably fine. Like everybody says they're amazing. I'm sure they're fine, but I don't like the entire model, so I'm not going to support it. Right? I just don't like it. Personally, it's just not something I'm personally going to recommend. You can buy them if you want. And I guess that's the perception that people have of me, is they're like, you hate Harley, but I don't care. Like I think you should buy them if you need them. But really understand what you're getting and why you're getting it. Okay. That's the most important thing. You're getting it because they have vertically integrated their retail side and cut out a lot of value from the instrument that you get but have to pay for with other brands. Okay, that's basically what they've done. And if that's okay with you, then go ahead and buy them. But understand that that is not reality. That what they've done there is created this little thing that sort of works, but not really. We'll see how long they stay around. We'll see how long they stay around. All of this works to basically create a situation where everybody thinks that whatever price they should pay is based on their best deal that they've ever seen online, right? Well, I can get it for X. I can get it for Y. I see this all the time in watches. So like, for example, you could I just bought a Seiko Pogue Speedmaster, and I got mine from a retail dealer on sale for like $200 under MSRP, but it was on sale. Like, it was actually on sale. I could have bought it at sort of a Harley Benton-ish sort of direct gray markety retail-y site thing for probably about $100 less. The problem is that you don't have any retail support, you don't have any customer support, and you might get a good one. You might get a second. You might get who knows what, right? I'm not willing to give up that $100 and give up that, I'm not willing to give up that value. The same thing happens with this guitar stuff when you start looking at, and I'm not talking about like a gray market sales, but I'm talking about the way the brand is structured. Those are the things that you give up. And so you can't just say this guitar isn't worth it because it costs this much money. You have to look at the value that is built into each brand. Because let's face it, when somebody says a guitar is overpriced, what that basically means is they don't want it. Because the guitar's not overpriced. And here's why we know. Everybody else is buying it except for you. You can't get, all these special edition Gibsons sell out. Gibson is continually building and building and building and building and building. They build 500-600 guitars a day, and they all sell. All the Epiphones sell. All the Fenders sell. The Squiers don't. Those go on clearance. PRS SEs go on clearance at the end of every year. And that has to do with the whole economics of building at scale overseas and then having to deal with overbought inventory. That's a whole nother video. We could talk about that. But the American-made stuff, it all sells. You wait on it half the time. So we know that people buy it. So it's not that the guitar is overpriced. It's that's just code for you don't want to spend the money on it, which is totally fine. The reason this is important is because how we approach this in the community is important. It is, in my opinion, destructive to the community when people who are like, these guitars are overpriced, and then they start bad-mouthing various brands that they think are overpriced. I'm like, look, if I'm going to spend $4,000 for this acoustic, it's my money. I like it. I think it's cool. I'm not going to badmouth you for buying a $300 guitar. I don't think that's if that's what you need and what you want, that's a great purchase for you. And this guitar would be a bad purchase for you. And I would hate to see you buy this guitar because it would be a bad purchase for you. Just let it be. But people need to understand what this value is. To be honest with you, I like it. That's all that matters. Who cares what kind of frets are on it? Who cares what it's made of? Who cares where it's made? I like it. I think it's cool. That, to be honest with you folks, is why we play guitar. Because we think it's cool. If you think your guitar is cool, then you have the right guitar.